One of the things I noticed when I was in Ottawa and driving around with my brother was the growing industry of storage units. These facilities are getting bigger, not only this way, but higher, looking nicer, expanding in services, and they're not cheap. The average storage facility back here in Vancouver is $350 per month. That adds up over a year. I'm not sure how long the average customer rents out a unit for, but that's probably another shocking statistic. You would think that this industry would have taken a severe hit during COVID. Nope, it didn't, at least not that I'm aware of. The industry certainly maintained itself, and at least in Ottawa is growing and expanding, even as we are coming out of COVID. If you don't have a storage unit, then look at how many cars are parked on the road in the neighborhood. When I came here 12 years ago, it really sort of threw me. So I thought, why would everybody be parking on the road? We have garages, right? But somebody told me it's because the garages are filled with things, so they have to park on the road. So the garage becomes a storage unit. Now, that's not every case, but in many cases, that's the way it is. We are a society of pack rats, chipmunks, big fat cheeks like to store things up, who store up things and more things. I still remember when I moved here from Powell River 12 years ago, through the people who helped me, we threw away 5 or 6 big green garbage bags of stuff that I wasn't using. Therefore, it's not really of use to me. I just wasn't letting it go. And they had to kind of wrench a lot of things from me and said, Father, like, really? This seems to be something that most people, perhaps all of us in different ways, struggle with. The important thing is that we recognize this, if it is present in our lives, and then name it and look for ways to deal with it and resolve it. The very fact that Jesus teaches about it indicates that it is a human problem. So where do we go for advice on how to deal with this? The Holy Spirit teaches us in all of the readings of this Sunday what perspective we should have with regards to material possessions which affect our relationship with God and each other. When hearing the first reading from the author who is described as the teacher, he has several names, the teacher, people think it might have been Solomon. Whatever the case, it's the Holy Spirit behind him. It is important to know that he's not trying to discourage us from owning things, or he's not saying life has no meaning. This word vanity doesn't mean like what we tend to think about vanity, like you're so vain, which means you're just hooked on the way you present yourself to people and what people think of you. Like the weather vane on top of the old barns that goes in the direction of the winds. So sometimes our ego can be like a weather vane. So we're so concerned about what everybody thinks about us. That's not what he means. Vanity here means short-lived, superficial in a sense. Not superficial, but short-lived. It's kind of like it's here today and gone tomorrow. It's temporary. That's what vanity of vanities is meant by the author. So he says, vanity of vanities. He starts it out this way. It sounds rather negative. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. He's really trying to ground us in what is truly important to avoid being blinded by the short-lived nature of goods. The full wisdom of his teaching, of this teaching, comes to light when we hear Jesus teaching us how we need to live our lives. To not build up bigger storage units or barns and keeping it, because the guy's going to live off of it, but he could, like God says, what if you die tonight? Or what if you live 5 years, but you have 10 years of grain? Are you just going to die with that, and it not be used in some sort of constructive, positive, supernatural way, basically thinking only about himself. If you or I just gloss over this teaching of Ecclesiastes and Jesus, Paul speaks about it in his own way, which calls us to direct our lives for heaven, then you and I will most likely fall into the trap that our society sets for us all the time, this vanity of vanities. The trap is basically buy, possess, fill your garage. I'm not saying that outright, but that's what happens. Get a storage unit. Build bigger barns. You need more and more to make yourself feel secure. If you really peel back a lot of this stuff, it's about feeling secure and having a certain kind of control over life. You need this more and more, and really don't think about dying. Or at least live life in such a way that it's kind of like a huge Costco, and you try to get as much out of the store as possible before you have to enter the checkout line. Psychologically, that's the way the world wants us to think. And the enemy wants us to think this way. All the while, what happens is God is all too easily displaced from his primary place in our life, which leads then to a neglect of the poor, to the neglect of the needs around us, our family, our own personal life, in many instances, our own personal well-being and the well-being of others that we could help if we were thinking outside of ourselves. The man in the gospel is an example of this. And also the man who dressed in fine purple and feasted every day, another parable that Jesus taught. Here's what one saying teaches us about possessing wealth and riches, and basically just thinking about it on our own, about how we're going to use it. Or maybe not even use it, just have it available. St. Teresa of Avila, the great thing about the saints is that they see through a lot of the cloud that we allow to basically dim our inner vision. They see through this stuff. Quote, "They do not reflect that their riches are not their own, but given by the Lord, so that they, as his stewards, may share their wealth among the poor, and that they must give a strict account for that time they keep a surplus in their coffers." To repeat, it's not about the possessing of things in and of itself. Jesus is very clear about this at the end of the gospel, and that's what we should meditate on, as well as the vanity of vanities. It's the intention of using our resources just for ourselves, or just having it available, even if we never use it. Like, I wasn't using 5 garbage bags full of stuff. I was just there, and I wouldn't give it to the Sally Ann, or I wouldn't help other people with it. Basically, it's kind of an eat, drink, and be merry way of life. This can often lead us, if we're not careful, extraordinarily careful, to a self-centered existence. All of us needs to think about the obvious fact that there is no U-Haul behind the hearse that will take us to the church and then to the graveyard. It's true, right? We're not going to be like the Egyptian pharaohs who, they put all their gold in their stuff. Even some of their live servants were in the pyramids with them. Like, how loony is this? This is of the devil. People would die in those things because they would be there when the person entered into the afterlife. That is not of God. That is of the devil. And to have our riches there. But that's what happens when we back away from God and we lose sight of the one true God. No U-Haul behind our hearse. We are being challenged to think about whether we are acquiring things, heaping up things at the expense of our relationship with God and other people around us. I began with the growing industry of storage units and cars parked on the road, because the garage basically winds up becoming a storage unit. All of us, to the person, very, very much assure you of this, need to ask ourselves, is that where we want to be now? Is that where we want to be at the end of our life? If you want to fight against the culture in which we live, this buy, possess, spend on that card and worry about paying later, and live the correct way, then we need to ask, how can I do this? How can I do this? Now, a parish, I've been told, Father and I, talking to this person from Nova Scotia, been told that basically a parish will know what its priorities are by looking at the budget. Is it just addressing the needs that come up in the case of a parish, or is it missionary-minded? Is it looking to how it can grow and reach out to others? The budget will often reveal the answer. Numbers tend not to lie. We can lie about the numbers, but the numbers don't lie to us. If you want to know where your priorities lie, where they really are, whether you are living this vanity of vanities or at least trying to fight against this way of living, then go home and look at your Visa or credit card statement or your family budget. Look at it. But the credit card statement tends to be a little more in time, over several months, what we're really spending our money on. And just take a good look. Like the parish budget, it will reveal the answer, or at least part of it, perhaps even more than a part. Let Jesus be Lord of your budget. Let Jesus be Lord of your budget and your possessions. There are possessions which, of course, they feed into each other. Let Jesus be Lord of this. Each day, renew the struggle against the vanity of vanities lifestyle for a life directed towards heaven, where St. Paul says Christ is seated at the right hand of God, and he's waiting for us, and he wants us to be truly free.